Good evening and welcome to Games with Garfield. I'm your host, Jessica Price, and I have with me tonight Skaff Elias.
Hello.
And Richard Garfield.
It's good to be back.
So you say you're glad to be back. Glad to be back from where?
Well, from not doing podcasts for a long time, but geographically from France.
What were you doing in France?
I was in France for the release of King of Tokyo, which was released by Iello, a French distributor and now publisher.
It just so happens that we finished a rousing game of King of Tokyo a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it's not available in the States yet, but I'm told within a month or two it will be. We do have an English copy, though, and the French copies are on sale if you want to head out there, or if you live there.
Yellow like the color?
Iello.
Interesting.
Which I believe is pronounced yellow.
So, King of Tokyo is a game in which you get to play one of several monsters based, I think, on sort of classic sci-fi movies, correct?
There's a term for that, kaiju. Wow, I'd never heard that word, and I looked it up, and it means the genre of giant monsters attacking cities, and the yellow people pointed that out to me.
You didn't just...
That's definitely staying in. That's definitely staying in. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So for our
You
listeners,
racist. It's like streaming to the internet now.
you meant Yellow is in the publisher of King of Tokyo.
Yeah.
Why Godzilla-style monsters?
Well, that's an interesting story. I really like the mechanics for Yahtzee. I think Yahtzee is a very elegant game, which I understand you haven't played.
I have never played.
Yes,
but
you
yes,
should.
So King of Tokyo is apparently King of the Hill meets Yahtzee.
Yeah, the goal I was setting myself is I wanted to make Yahtzee but more interactive, because Yahtzee is not very interactive. The only interaction in Yahtzee is how far you press your luck in order to meet the challenges which your opponents have put up for you. So I came up with this kind of generic mechanic for interaction. It felt like it was a really good game, and I sat down with Skaff and asked him for some ideas for what themes to put on it, because at that point it was kind of a generic fantasy King of the Hill game, which I often like to develop in because it sort of leaves me free to do whatever I like. Skaff gave 2 ideas. He probably gave more, but the ones I remember were your mob bosses fighting over New York. So then it would have been King of New York, and that felt pretty good. That felt like what was going on in the game. And then there was also the idea of monsters fighting over Tokyo, and that also I liked a lot.
Richard likes to have humor in a lot of his games, and I steered him away from that, and we went with monsters instead of the funny mob bosses.
We had a lot of humor in our game.
Yeah.
As I was kicking your butts.
Yeah. Well, who was the first one knocked out? I don't recall. Wait, Richard, do you remember who the first person knocked out was?
Well, there was only one person knocked out.
Oh, that's
I believe.
right. There was only one person knocked out.
Was it Cyber Bunny?
It must have been.
It was.
No, wait, but you know what I forget? I forget who was playing Cyber Bunny. Could not have been the person who was kicking so much ass.
And yet,
it was.
Cyber Bunny went up in points faster than Richard had ever seen.
Cyber Bunny probably commanded the best odds at the 75% mark in the game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the dice hate me.
The dice really do hate you. They did not favor you.
They teased me.
They did.
In the beginning.
I could
were
practically
friends.
hear them going, yeah, 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 yeah.
I know.
From my point of view, the dice loved her. That's how she got up so high. And then it was strategy and the inability to control Tokyo as though it was her own personal
The inability
domain.
to roll threes is what you mean.
So anyway, the theme of monsters attacking Tokyo, I felt captured the King of the Hill mechanic very well. And it also plays into my I really like games which don't take themselves too seriously and have a sense of humor. And I was fortunate to find a publisher which really understood that. In the hands of the wrong publisher, this might have looked much more serious than I would like.
Yeah, even the way your name is on the box is funny looking.
My name is funny looking? You mean...
He looks humorous.
Yeah, okay.
It's like Richard Garfield, King of Tokyo. I mean, it makes it sound like you're the King of Tokyo.
Oh, that's
basically.
true. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
All it needs is a colon.
They've got a very comic look. They really did an outstanding job
Absolutely.
in putting this together. They did excellent art. Is very comic.
Do you mean comic as in funny or comic as in comic books?
Kind of both. It looks like comic book art, and
really
it is very funny. Really, with
Cyber Bunny is
Cyber
hilarious.
Bunny
It's
captures
a tiny little bunny piloting a giant pink bunny mech with a sword.
Really, yeah, and the others, we've got a sort of a Godzilla-like guy and a Cthulhu-like guy, and somebody looks like Invasion from Mars.
And Cthulhu has like one
Mars Attacks
fist and one giant lobster claw. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the only problem that I have with it, because it is absolutely amazing, is that their Kong character evidently has to have a bolt and a mechanical eye.
Konkenstein.
He is he is Kongenstein, and
Mecha Kong.
he is, but that just sucks because it's not Kong, so because Kong rules, and this guy is some robot
Cthulhu
imitator.
Isn't really Cthulhu either.
Yeah, well, it makes sense if they had the real Kong in there, then
you
he
would
would
get
automatically
sued
win
for
or something.
copyright infringement. But I mean, Cthulhu is actually a giant invisible whistling octopus, not
Well, it's made visible here for us.
Yeah.
Right.
So actually, I want to talk about the King of the Hill mechanics. To me, the most interesting thing about King of Tokyo is the limitation of the politics in the game.
Hang on. There
Yes.
were tons of politics. There were mind games. I remember begging you at one point.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. There was less than you think. There's less than a lot of games. For instance, games where you can freely attack each other are very political. But here you never chose who you would attack.
Oh, you can only attack the guy on the hill.
You chose to be in Tokyo.
Right.
So the rules of the game are that if you do attacks, you attack the person in Tokyo. That's so if Skaff's not in Tokyo and I'm not in Tokyo, I'm not attacking
Yes,
Skaff.
but the fact
There's
that
no
you guys
choice.
waited so long to start worrying about Javier when he was basically in the same position that was mind games.
The problem was we couldn't do anything about Javier because he wasn't in Tokyo.
Right.
Cyber Bunny was.
You were the one that decided not to give up Tokyo
and I was a benevolent queen.
to Javier when Javier was attacking you turn after turn after turn.
Well, that would have been...
Yes, that would have been smart. Yeah, and so if you gave Tokyo to him, then we could have attacked him, but we weren't able to because you kept Tokyo because you wanted to be the king.
I think
and
you
or
were
queen.
actually just jealous of my pink fabulousness.
You were fabulous.
But it is interesting. There is you can interact with people specifically. There are several cards that let you do that, but in general, it's limited. It's just constrained. It's constrained in a nice way where you have some ability to affect people individually. You have some ability to interrupt personal strategies, but not as much as freeform, and that makes it sort of a lot less about the pure politics. And,
I don't know. I mean, there was a
more
lot
about
of
the general game state.
Well, you can only attack one particular person unless you're the king, in which case your attacks do damage to everybody who's not you.
Right, which again, you can't differentiate.
I should point out here the exact mechanics of the game are when you do attacks, you attack Tokyo. They can give up Tokyo if they want, and then you have to take Tokyo. When you're in Tokyo, you attack everybody else. And that's all the base level mechanics and the interaction in the game.
Right, but I would say it still felt like there were a lot of politics. We were all talking about what people should do as they're re-rolling their dice.
That's true. You just couldn't do anything about it.
That's true.
Right, like it certainly could have been that what I wanted to do was to kill Hav because I agreed with you. He was
the dark horse.
But we couldn't do anything about him because you were the one in Tokyo.
Yeah, but I mean, there are cards that let you interact directly with people in other ways.
Absolutely.
But there's no cards which say choose somebody to do 2 damage to. There are cards which do 2 damage to everybody, which may affect some people more than others, or heal everybody.
Right, but there are cards like the one that Skaff had that could force somebody to re-roll a die, and you choose who you use it on.
Well, right, he could use it on everybody though,
and did use it on everyone.
Did.
Right, it was one person a turn. So
yeah, and so that's something which I really look for in games. I tend not to go for heavily political games, which I
love heavily political games.
I'm very good
because
at
you can
political
bamboozle
games.
people.
Yes.
because I've got a near mystical ability to appear to be in second place. But isn't that true, Skaff?
Yeah, to all except a chosen few.
Yeah, but
who are the Cassandras, the criers.
But
warning of the impending doom at the hands of Richard Garfield, but no one will listen to us.
I don't like attacking Richard. It makes me feel guilty.
Oh my gosh. You've brought up every bad game experience I've had in the last 20 years.
So, but despite the fact that I'm good at political games, I tend to go against them. And the reason is just because one political game is often like another.
That's
because
true.
It's not so much about playing the game as playing the people you're with.
Right. But, I mean, really, there are very few games where you aren't playing the people you're with. I mean, there are very few multiplayer.
I will say the main reason I think Richard doesn't like political games is because, for the same reason, I don't enjoy playing a lot of tic-tac-toe. It bores me. Those games bore him. He has solved.
You are a very straightforward person.
He has
Skaff.
solved the political problem.
No, but take poker, for example. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to pick on somebody in poker.
Right, but poker is very political in that you are trying to read what the other person is doing and influence them.
That's not political.
Politics. Yeah. Our definition of politics is that you can pick two people and favor one and hurt the other.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I was viewing it more broadly as mind games.
Oh no, I love mind games. Yeah, I love bluffing and hidden information. Those top my list. So I'm talking in particular, like a card which says do 2 damage to a player of your choice. That's a political decision. Do I do it to you? A surefire sign that there's politics in your game, by our definition of politics, is if people whine, "Don't do that, I'm in last place." That's politics.
So basically, to put it less in terms of behavior and more in terms of mechanics, anytime you have choice in whom you hurt.
That's right.
Effect, you should say effect rather than hurt. But
whom you hurt or
when
whom
you
help.
have the ability to differentiate between two different players.
Right. Because sometimes I can play a card which will help everybody. So who do I help? So it could be hurt or help. It's just effect. And some games can be very interactive, but not very political, like poker. And some games like Yahtzee are just not very interactive, and so they're not political for that reason. A lot of the Euro games are often not... They're interactive in a very indirect way. So
multiplayer solitaire, almost.
Well, not and there's multiplayer solitaire at one extreme, but then there's also this sort of like Puerto Rico, which is like I like to call that sort of passive aggressive interaction, where, and I'm sure you've played a bunch of games like this, where I make decisions which will affect you, because if I do this, then you can't do that, and you have to do this, but it's a very indirect interaction.
For that matter, Dominion is almost like the original Dominion. There are a few cards that are directly interactive where you can attack other players, but for the most part...
That goes, I think, in the multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah, Dominion is at the low end of sort of player interaction.
Which, again, I don't mind, I don't games with politics, I think they're fine for a lot of people. And games with low interaction are fine too. Like as I said, I began out saying I really admire Yahtzee. I do. It's a very low interaction game, though.
So political games have this thing where, for a lot of play groups, they're really great. Politics does great things in games. Namely, it's it's very hard to fall behind in a political game, because people will pick on the winner, help the loser, etc. And so, you're sitting around for a party game, and it's actually surprising. These games with a lot of politics in them just happen to always turn out to be close and fun, and there's a lot of interaction between the players, and that's all great. The reason why I personally don't like them is because of this thing that Richard mentioned earlier, which is they do tend, after a while, to kind of be very similar to each other, where the political interaction is the dominant feature of it, and the individual mechanics that are going on, the thing that makes this game unique, are a lot less important. And as soon as you resolve what those mechanics mean, and you boil it down to just the political interaction, it's the same as every other type of those games.
I was going to say, when I think about the games with a lot of politics in them that I've really enjoyed, it tends to be stuff where the politics are the main feature and not, one of many. Like, I love Werewolf, But when I think of like board games that are really political, I tend to enjoy those less. I almost feel like the politics works best when it's, the primary mechanic. But it's funny that you mention it being party games, because most of the games that are highly political that I think of as being party games are games like Werewolf, where politics are almost everything.
Werewolf in particular is sort of an interesting case. Werewolf feels like it has a lot of politics in it, but by our definition, it actually has zero politics in it. And the reason is because, sorry, you'll have
insert
to take
a quizzical look.
I
wish you all could see her face.
Other players to choose.
Yeah, but you're not. But here's the problem: in Werewolf, there's only two sides, and so you actually don't have the ability to affect one team versus another. You're only affecting your team or the other team. So there are apparent politics in Werewolf because people don't like to be eliminated first. But when you play the standard way, which is you win or lose whether or not you were killed, it's just whether your side wins or not. There really are, sort of by any kind of technical definition, there's really not politics, at least sort of how we've defined it. And the interesting part about Werewolf is people misplay Werewolf all the time because they think of it as being a political game. They think they don't want to die first. They don't want to self-sacrifice. It's very difficult because of the roles they've constructed for themselves to actually realize that all that matters is whether their team wins or not.
I suppose that makes sense if, when you're explaining the game, you posit that when you're out of the game, you're still part of a team that can win or lose, and not when you're out, you've lost.
Yeah, we try to emphasize that always. But you're absolutely right. What goes on in Werewolf, there's no way you can't really call that politics. There's politics going on, but by our definition, what we're interested in games, the actual effect, you can't really have politics in a two-sided game, because when we said you differentially affect one player versus another, what we really mean there is one side versus another, and if there's only two sides, you can't.
Well, right, but it's interesting in that that's your interpretation of how the game works, that you're on a team, and even if you die, if your team wins, you win.
Yeah.
But
if that's not the case, then it's going to be very political.
That's
almost
right.
every time
Absolutely.
I've played it, it's like, well, you die and then you're out.
Oh, so in your groups, when you got eliminated, you lost.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's definitely political.
That's right. That absolutely, because there's not two sides in that game.
But even if that's not the case, it's still reasonable to be confused by that, because I'm negotiating with other people and people are doing witch hunts. I mean, how can that not be political?
Well, and I mean, if you think about it, yes, it's easy to take the long view of, I don't care whether I survive so long as my team wins, but considering that the way that the game is set up, the story put with it, the skin put on it, is you're hanging a villager every day. I think it's very hard for, just like if you play lifeboats, it's hard not to think of when one of your players gets thrown out of the boat that you have come that much closer to losing because you've lost that player, even though in lifeboats you can get down to a minimum number of players and still actually win, even if you're down early.
Uh-huh.
I guess it's hard when you have that, when part of the story is death, it's hard not to view that
It's
as
true.
Losing.
It is. And that's why we have to emphasize that your goal as a townsfolk is to have the werewolves die, even if you die in the process. But that can be a lot for people to swallow.
It's a leap.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to King of Tokyo, so what looks like a lot of politics is, by your definition of politics, not actually.
Right. It's difficult to differentially affect people. People will say, okay, well, we've all got to pile on that person. But the thing is that if you pile on them, that is, you all try to attack them, they can just leave Tokyo and then you can't attack them anymore. And so people can really remove themselves from the interactive zone, so to speak, easily.
And that's actually what makes the game interesting, is because you will get to a point where people say, we all need to pile on this person, and you will do your best to do that. And,
believe me, I remember.
and then what happens is you can affect them a little. Mm-hmm. So it's really nice in that way, in that it's not a strict race game where there's no interaction, but there's enough limitations on how you affect different people that there's that it doesn't just boil down to the politics. There is a lot more about the actual mechanics of the game that help differentiate it from, say, more political games, where it's just a matter of deciding who to pick on.
Well, and so one of the places where the mechanics get a little more complex is in the cards that you can buy, which give your monster particular powers, apparently even extra heads, although we didn't see that in our game.
Yeah.
So what was the philosophy behind what powers you chose to put out there with the cards?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when I decided to switch the game to a King of Tokyo game from a King of the Hill generic game, the second part of that, which I think is really important, when you've got a generic game and you're trying to put flavor on it, oftentimes you'll come up with a flavor and you'll put that on, a motif, and then the mechanics may support it, but they may not. I mean, it may not. It's not going to be a perfect fit because that's not what we were thinking. So once we came up with the King of Tokyo, we also sat down. We brainstormed what sort of cards do we want to see in this, because of course, when I did this, I didn't have wings, but you got to have some monsters with wings. And so we thought, okay, well, we need the army. Well, what's an army card? We need tanks. We need jet fighters. We need jets, because Gamera has
Friend
jets.
of children.
Right.
Friend of children.
And, the cards themselves had to get redesigned based on the flavor, and so first the mechanics suggested the flavor, and then the flavor suggested a lot of redesign to the game.
And it's interesting because when we first started setting it up and I was looking at my character and my little character Matt, I was surprised because pretty much every other game I've played where you pick a character and you get a little character Matt, that character has unique powers or unique attributes of some sort. And here all the characters they start out identical, but you basically build your character with these cards that give them powers.
Right, and that's so for the last 20 years or so, I've been playing games with what we call Garfield Surprise. And what Garfield Surprise means is in any card game you might play, you take your deck and you throw out some of the cards. Let's say a regular 52-card deck or double deck, and you throw out some of the cards. And the interesting thing there is it makes card counting hard, say impossible, but every game is different then, and there's a different quality, and the end game is not necessarily the same. And that's actually a lot of what's going on in King of Tokyo. You have this massive deck of cards with lots of different powers, and you only see a few of them every game. And if you play King of Tokyo once, you will be the first question you'll ask is, why don't I get to see more of those cards? And you play it twice, and you'll probably still ask that question. And you play it 3 times, and then you begin to understand, wow, each of those games played out a lot differently because I'm only seeing 10 of the, how many cards are there? 50, 60, something like that?
Between 50 and 60, yeah.
And then you keep getting a different mix of, say, 10 or so every time you play. That's really interesting. That keeps every game different. Your strategy changes a lot. And so, yeah, that's one of the cool parts about the game as far as the cards go.
So in a way, it's almost like a randomized Dominion, where instead of, I know some people pick their Dominion cards randomly, but in this case, I mean, I understand it's not completely.
It's actually a lot like Dominion in that regard.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the things in Dominion I admire the most is not the deck building. It's the fact that you flip up 10 cards, or you choose 10 cards, and that gives you a unique game. And so in that sense, it's similar. That there's only going to be 15 cards on top of this deck, and you're only going to get through 15, and so that's your game.
Yeah, if Dominion had 10 cards and that's all it had, it would not be Game of the Year. I mean, and people wouldn't play it very much. So it did it right in King of Tokyo, I think,
So how many cards on average? You think it's about 15 that people go through on an average game? Did we go through 15?
I think for 4 people, no, we didn't go through 15. I think for 4 people, 8 cards.
Okay.
10 cards.
Somewhere in there.
So it's an average of two or 3 cards per person. Some people won't get any. Some people will get 5. One of the things you pointed out was, you mentioned, was a very common reaction is they look at these beautiful pieces that those yellow people have put together, which and they expect them to be different. I mean, Cyber Bunny should be different than the King, And many of the people who play tested the game sort of suggested that, and it just felt like that was adding too many rules to the game. That's something I expect for the expansion. Once people have got the basic mechanics down, I think starting from a different place will make a lot of sense. But when people are first experiencing the game, I think beginning from the same place is probably better.
So one of the things that was a little surprising to me is you roll these 6 dice and you have to choose between victory points, between attacking, between healing, and between energy, or some, combination of those. And most of the games I've played, the currency is something that you get every turn, or, every turn you get the equivalent here of energy. Why did you decide to make it a random factor? Did you just want to force that choice, or?
I was building from this Yahtzee mechanic. So I began with, you roll a bunch of dice and you can re-roll and you can re-roll, and then you're stuck with what you got. So the real question there was what do I want people striving to get? And I hit this place which I really like, which is the victory points, the 1s, 2s, and 3s. You need 3 of to make them work. If you don't get 3 3s or 3 2s or 3 1s, you've just wasted your time.
So in a way, they're the most expensive.
Yeah, that's directly advancing your way towards victory, which is the goal of the game, is to get 20 victory points, or to eliminate all the other monsters, or eliminate the monsters that have a lot of victory points and then get 20 victory points yourself. But then the way the 1s, 2s, and 3s worked versus the attacks, heals, and energy, I really liked, where the attacks, heals, and energies all trigger independently. Like 2 energy, you get 2 energy. It's very simple. Which means that there's a very different feel. Energy is something that's kind of easy to get because you can save some of it and re-roll the rest, whereas 2s and 3s, you have to work a little harder to get.
Yeah, the energy almost felt like a bonus, which is interesting because in most games where there is currency where you don't necessarily get it every turn, and one of the games we talked about, Dice Town here, there's sort of a starvation mechanic in play where, if you don't devote time and energy to getting...
Right, there really are 3 things in the game. The one is the victory points, the other is the damage to knock other people out, and the third is the energy, the currency. And the cool part about King of Tokyo is if you play it enough, you'll play plenty of games where it's a race in victory points, and you'll play plenty of games where it's a race to knock each other out, and you'll play plenty of games where you've got to switch that strategy of what's most valuable once or twice during the course of the game. And then, of course, energy is sitting there in this interesting place where it depends on what cards are on the table. But energy, by the way, in the game is the currency that you use to buy these cards. And sometimes the cards will aid victory points, sometimes they'll aid in damage, and so you can play it either way.
Yeah, it was interesting to me, having been burned in a lot of games that do have that where you don't automatically get currency every turn, and you end up not really being able to do anything because you have no money. I was worried about that at the beginning of the game because energy was not something I was going for, and you were building up this massive bank of it. But it actually
and we both lost, and you and I both lost.
Right. Well,
yeah.
And the energy actually almost felt optional.
Sure, as are the victory points, as is the damage. You play this game enough, and it'll be different every time. If you roll on your opening roll, and the first turn you're in Tokyo, and you get 6 damage, and you're destroying people, that's going to set the character of the game. And if you roll a lot of victory points, and you start racing ahead, like Cyber Bunny did, that'll set the tone of the game. And it depends on what the cards are out there. Maybe you want to go for energy, maybe you don't because they're bad buys. And so every game is different, which makes it really cool.
Although it's easier to see how, you have 2 dials on your mat that lead to victory or to losing, right? You have the victory points and you have your health, and victory points go up, your health goes down over the course of the game. You can make your health go up, but the energy is interesting because, it's not visibly tied to either of those 2 things that'll either win or lose the game for you. But, toward the end of the game, when I was at 17 points, you played a 20. And, I'm looking at these cards that could have won the game for me. Suddenly,
yeah, now you wish you had that energy.
Yeah, started seeming a lot more vital.
I want to give a call out to, Iello for, I've already said they did a great job, but I think I've never worked with a publisher that's done a better job. Wizards was great. I described what Magic was. They took my vision, and they did an excellent job with it. But Iello actually not only did what I was interested in, but they added to it in really pretty significant ways. We've already mentioned that they've came out with these great comic characters. Like we never said to them, Cyber Bunny. They came up with that, It worked perfectly. But additionally, they actually came up with some component ideas which really added to the game. When we were my playtest version, there's a card which is called the Tokyo card, and when you're in Tokyo, you get that card. So what they did was they made so there's a mat, a very small board which has only one space in it, Tokyo. There's also Tokyo Bay if you're playing with 5 or 6 people, but pretty much there's only one space. I've taken that out, and people have looked at it and said, "Ooh, I can tell this is going to be a tactical game because the board has one space on it." But then you take these wonderful miniatures they've made, and when you're in Tokyo, you put it in the middle there. Right, and you've got a life counter and a victory point counter, which corresponds to that miniature, and it all ties together really well. Like in my version, there was no reason for everybody to be a distinct monster, but now we've got this focal point in the middle, and you put your miniature there.
Yeah, there's something very fun and very visceral about being able to plunk down your monster on that board.
Yeah,
it's very satisfying.
I was really impressed with them. I was asked, in fact, in France by a number of people, why did you go with such a small publisher? Because Iello distributes a lot of stuff, but they haven't published much. And well, the real answer is because I'm really lazy. I come up with these games and I don't spend any energy pitching them because I hate selling games. And sometimes people are interested in, sometimes they aren't. It doesn't really bother me because usually the games I make, I get my pleasure playing with my friends and family. And then when I meet with publishers, I show them what I've got, and they may or may not respond to it. So I sort of randomly sent it to Iello because they were interested in doing some work with me, and they really understood it. Some other publishers I had shown the game to kind of felt like it didn't feel like a monster game, but Iello saw it for what it could be and made it feel like a monster game.
That's awesome.
I hear the premium version coming out this Christmas time actually has suits where you dress up as a monster. Is that correct? I mean, that's a rumor. I read that on the internet.
I'm sure it's true then.
Dressing up, yeah. And you get a little cardboard copy of Tokyo to stomp on.
So in addition to the things that Iello brought to it as far as the fiction, were there any other surprises? You mentioned that the games you design you enjoy playing with your friends and family, but are your friends and family a representative test group?
Yeah, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
No, I choose, my family is... Everybody's family is broad.
Richard chooses his friends on the basis of trying to keep a balance of various sorts of psychographics and demographics to play with.
It's actually not far from the truth. I invite people every week to play games, and I intentionally invite often very serious players and often very casual players. Right, it's because I enjoy it all.
Do you invite
you there? You're an American
players?
Indian female between the ages of 10 and 13.
Do I invite
Would you like to be my friend?
Stupid players?
Well,
no.
Like in a situation with people who shout.
I don't have any stupid people. Stupid people don't play my games. That's
okay, that's good. I mean, there was a time
and that's a clever lie on Richard's part, so that none of his friends have to think, oh, wait, maybe I'm the stupid one. Just let's say the IQ of Richard's friends follows a nice bell curve that happens to match the game-playing population of the United States.
I just remember a particular playtest with children in which somebody was like, yeah, we're fine, and then somebody else was like, but we haven't tested this with any stupid kids. Like, all the kids have been really smart. We can't really tell whether this game is going to sell.
I design games for myself. I do design games for markets also and for demographics, but particularly with paper games, which tend to be, in general, they're really bad business. And so I design them for myself. And my tastes tend to be very broad. I want to play a game that I can play with my parents or my kids, or my stupid friends, as well as my smart
I'm
friends.
so scared. No, he was looking at me.
But the wonderful thing about games is that you can find games you don't have to pick your games for that. Poker can be played with any group, young, old, stupid, smart, analytic, not. It's just a fantastic game, and
as long as you have money.
Yeah,
not
the
Skaff.
poor though.
Not the poor.
Not the poor. Everybody else. Stupid rich people.
Oliver, you can be as dumb as you want and play poker with me. That's fine with me.
All you care about is whether you have money.
Like I'm like really, yeah, it's no problem.
Well, it is interesting just in how different the game can become based on who you're playing with. I just over lunch this week played a game called Yomi with one of my friends at work, and he was pointing out to me that the game had been massively different with each person he'd played it with, because he played it with some people who were basically button mashers, right? Like Yomi is a fighting game, sort of like Street Fighter, but it's a card game.
Yeah, it's actually by the same person who does Puzzle Strike. He does not put his name on the front.
Good for him.
What do you mean? That's a... Screw you.
Modesty is such a becoming trait.
It is, but the thing is that...
I mean, it's in my modesty that I truly reach perfection.
I actually think that the game designers should get their names on boxes, and part of the reason there is because I want them not only to take credit for the game, but to take responsibility for it. When you read a book and you don't like that book, you avoid the author because the author's name is so prominent and important to the
Hello,
game.
Dan Brown.
And with games, it's often so hidden. It's really bad.
Yeah, it is.
Oftentimes, games will be such a group effort that is really hard to give one person credit or two people. But when it isn't, I really think it's that it should be promoted.
Yeah.
David Serling. Yeah, that's who it is. And I've played Yomi. I haven't played it a lot, but I was really impressed by the Yomi design also. I hope to do a glimpse on that also.
Very cool. Getting back to what I was saying about Yomi, he also said that he'd played with people, like when I played with him, it was very much a mind game. It was very much, me trying to figure out, all right, if I were him and I knew me like he knows me, what would I think I'm about to do? And there are, layers of it. So he said that it had been a very different game when he played with his people who were very just card text oriented versus his. The only problem I can see with it is, as far as I understand it, and I had just played it with him and then checked it out on the internet, it's a 2-person only game, correct?
It is. I'm sure that you could make a good team game out of it. I'm not sure if you could do a free for all. I kind of doubt it. I didn't think you could make a free for all for Magic either, but they've done it. So,
is there anything else you'd like to?
One other thing I might mention is that I decided on my trip to France that actually I might really have an affinity towards French game players and game designers.
Why is that?
It's taken me a little while to connect the dots there. I'd already realized it, and Skaff had pointed it out with the Italian games designers. I had recognized it, and he had recognized it with the French game designers. Yeah. But I hadn't realized that. There's a sense of humor which is in a lot of them, like the German game designs, and I love a lot of those game designs. But broadly, they're very serious. And they take themselves seriously, and there's not much luck. And you've got these exceptions like Settlers of Catan, which is a brilliant game. It's got some luck. Its theme is still pretty serious, but in general, the game culture there is very serious. In France and Italy...
Not to get all, superior warfist on you, but I wonder if it has something to do with language. Like, if I recall correctly, the word for game in Italian is gioco, which is etymologically related to our English word joke. Like I
didn't know that.
I mean, there's an inherent playfulness just in
play.
Yeah, just in what the words are related to, what other words
so
related to in Italian. So I wonder if it's. I mean, what is the word for game in German?
Spiel,
play,
which is play in German.
Right, but it doesn't have that etymological connection with humor.
With humor? Is that actually connected to humor in Italian, or is it connected to humor in English only?
I'm not sure, but spiel doesn't really...
Spiel sounds serious, doesn't it?
I sometimes wonder when cultures have a particular approach to something, how much it's influenced by the words they use to talk about it. It's often hard to
tell. But I actually did get told by one person who was playing King of Tokyo that they really enjoyed King of Tokyo there, but they didn't think it was going to sell in Germany because the Germans, they said, don't have this comic sense, meaning, I think, not humor, but like it looks like a comic book. And they said that was much more French.
And the French have some fine comics. France and America would be the two best comic production countries. The Iello website is www.iello.fr. And there's a link down below, but just in case you're listening only.
So if you want to check out King of Tokyo, that is www.iello, and that is iello.fr, not .com.
A little more on this connection with the French player. When I'm in France, I frequently get people coming up and of course, everywhere I go, people say magic is amazing. They love magic.
Was magic funny?
Well, magic is as funny as the designers make it. The initial release of Magic probably wasn't as humorous as I would make it today, because, well, I guess I would say I've matured as a designer. But it was actually humorous. Like the goblins in it were intended to be humorous, and also the effects in the game. Like people would come to me and say, "I just had my my giant invisible mammoths." Flying mammoths block somebody, and they think that was very funny. So it was intended to be like I was very happy with the comic consequences. The individual cards, there weren't so many that were comic, but there was this area of comicness, which was in the goblins mostly, but also sometimes in blue.
And we when I started developing sets, and creating sets, we dialed up the humor.
Giant invisible flying mammoths. Was somebody watching Dumbo?
So, but when I'm in France, though, it's amazing the number of people who come up and say, Robo Rally was the best game you ever made. That was an amazing game. And Robo Rally, of course, is very much in the same vein of humor as King of Tokyo. The robots are humorous. They're racing around. Wacky things happen. And there was a game I did called Pecking Order, which I think it sold more in France than all the other countries combined.
That is correct.
True? Yeah, we keep on getting these statements. And don't get me wrong, it didn't sell well anywhere, but the French made that product.
So when you go to France, do they give you gifts? Does this translate into like French wine and
I actually did get given some wine there.
Excellent.
I had a player, a Netrunner player who lives in Paris come down to Cannes where this game show was. He came down because he wanted to have me sign some Magic cards, some Netrunner cards. He couldn't care less about Magic, and I played a game with him, and he gave me some wine, and yes, so yes, I got some wine.
Excellent.
It's a Richard and Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, no, they like Jerry Lewis too, is what I hear, and
awesome.
me.
The really, 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 really funny guys like Richard and Jerry Lewis.
That's right.
So, Richard, you've been doing these game glimpses, and they've really taken off. You want to tell us what gave you the idea to do them?
Sure. Every week, people would ask me what I was up to, and I would talk about the game that I was playing, and I always had 5 or 10 minutes worth of stuff about each game I was playing, and I thought it'd be fun to sort of encapsulate that and make a podcast about it, something short, easy to do, which sort of followed my progress through games.
So are they reviews?
No, I wrestled a long time with the idea of putting up reviews because I think games reviews are something which is needed. When I pick up a new game, I'm often looking for reviews, and it's hard for me to find them, but it's really not the place of a game designer to review. It's a conflict of interest. So I'm never going to talk about a game that I don't think people should try. I'm never going to pan a game. If you're interested in games in some sort of general sense, there's going to be something about the game I'm talking about which might interest you.
So would you say then that they're recommendations?
I think everything I talk about is, for the student of games, everything I talk about is worth playing.
But for the person that wants to have fun, maybe or maybe not.
Right. Hopefully I'll give enough color to my feedback that if you're looking for fun rather than looking for some insight into games, you can tell.
So they're more like homework assignments.
So what they are is a designer's insight into games that for one reason or another he found interesting.
Right. I use it as a launching point for discussing games in a broader sense. So, for example, I talked about Dice Town, which is a game that has some really cool mechanics, and I talk about what those mechanics are. It also has quite a bit of politics, and politics is not necessarily bad. Some players like it, and some groups don't. That led me to talk about what role politics have in games in general, and so when you listen to this, you'll see what's interesting, and if your group doesn't like political games, you'll know not to play it.
So can you give us a sneak peek as to some game glimpses that might be coming up?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about Puzzle Strike next, I think. Puzzle Strike has been a really cool game with sort of Dominion-style mechanics. By the way, I love Dominion, and I do intend to do a glimpse on Dominion at some point or another. But most of the variants on it, so to speak, I don't think they've surpassed Dominion. But Puzzle Strike has some really cool things, which are I think have brought something to the genre of deck-building games.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and keep an eye out for Richard's upcoming game glimpses.
Thank you. You're a nice lady.
And I'm your host, Jessica Price, saying good night.
This is Skaff Elias saying good night.
Good night, Richard. Me. Now.
We'll talk to you soon.